A brown snake slithers across a cold cement floor. A woman is shot in the back, killed by her husband, who claims it's an accident.
I'm smelling a big rat here.
Our investigation starts now. Good evening, I'm Liz Hayes, and this is Under Investigation.
Creep like a lioness, make no sound, slide like a snake over some big ground.
Tonight, we investigate the tragic death of Leanne Sleeber and the husband who killed her.
Leanne was this incredibly devoted mother.
We analyse the evidence, the snake,
All snakes want is a bit of space.
and the shotgun.
It doesn't just go off.
The gun cannot go off.
Her husband's recollection of what happened that night.
It's unusual, and then the more you dig, the more unusual it gets.
And we ask, was justice served?
The argument is not that he killed his wife. The argument is, was it an accident or not?
April 24th, 2008. It's a chilly evening in Kingsthorpe, Queensland, 10 kilometres outside of Toowoomba. Jeffrey Sleeber, Leanne's husband, says he arrives at his rural home around 9 o'clock to see a brown snake entering his garage. Armed with a shovel, he and his wife Leanne go looking but can't find it. They search again an hour later, after dinner. Only this time, Jeffrey Sleeber is carrying a loaded shotgun. He tells police that suddenly, inside the garage, the snake slithers over his boot. Startled, he slips and the gun fires, hitting his wife in the back and killing her. Joining our investigation, Judith Fordham, leading criminal lawyer and forensics specialist.
I think it's the height of idiocy. Guns are dangerous things.
Paula Donovan, one of Queensland's top investigative journalists.
Seems to be a lot of missing pieces to a puzzle where two people are in a shed, one survives and one doesn't.
Former Queensland coroner John Hutton.
An accident can be excused, but it must be run in a court. This has never been ventilated in a court.
And Alex Christidge, veteran Victorian police detective and ballistics expert. Alex, you would argue that hunting a snake with a gun at night is a recipe for disaster.
Well, look, there are quite a few recipes for disaster here. Here we've got a bloke that's, in the first instance, armed himself with a shovel. He's quite happy to go in there and look for the snake with a shovel. After a short period of time, he abandons the idea of using a shovel, goes and arms himself with a 12-gauge shotgun. There are a lot of things that need to happen in order for us to collect all of the facts.
Alex Christidge will be in charge of our critical firearms experiments tonight.
There's been a tragedy near Toowoomba overnight.
With Leanne Sleeber dying before him, Jeffrey Sleeber calls 000. He also calls his father and his solicitor. As the man who killed his wife and the only witness,
The gun went off and I heard a scream.
Sleeber is interviewed by police twice, and each time he maintained the shooting was a tragic accident.
I looked up, all in it like a split. All this happened so fast.
Police believe him, and he will never face any charges. But there are lingering questions about his account of the night.
He's fairly clear about certain things, but when it comes to the actual shooting, he's not clear.
To veteran detective Alex Christich, the first question in this case is about the snake.
I imagined it come from the wood, see it come from the wood.
He says the snake materialises from the wood heap and then crosses his feet, causing him to jump and slip backwards and fire the weapon into his wife. Later on, he says he doesn't know where the snake came from.
I don't know where the snake come from, but it was heading that way, right?
In this shocking moment, it's perhaps understandable that Sleeper doesn't have total recall. However, equally curious about the snake is criminal lawyer Judith Fordham.
And this snake, he initially says, came down from the top of the wood heap. Then he says it came out from the wood heap. Then he says he doesn't know where it came from. Now, they can't all be true.
Jeffrey Sleeper tells investigators it was his wife who wanted to find the snake.
She said, I hate the snakes around with the kids.
He says Leanne's worried about this snake.
They're worried because the shed contains a fridge that their kids access milk. Leanne's concerned, he says, that the kids might end up going there early in the morning, which they have a habit of doing. And he says that the gun that he takes will give him a better chance of killing the snake.
Which he's done in the past, he says.
Yes, yeah. He said he has shot snakes several times on his property.
The farm, Sleeper says, was home to many snakes. But on this chilly April night, the Sleepers were apparently unlucky to see one because it was about 12 degrees, a temperature which experts say snakes would not normally be active. The snake was perhaps disturbed while the Sleepers moved items during their search.
This is our eastern brown snake. He is the second most toxic snake in our country.
With an eastern brown snake, handlers and educators John and Tina Mostyn demonstrate how snakes usually behave in temperatures and conditions similar to the night Leanne Sleeper was shot. The Mostyns have ensured this snake's body temperature is just 12 degrees, making it very sluggish.
At that 12-degree temperature, he's just sitting, not tightly coiled up, but in a coiled position. He's not stretched out, he's not looking to move away or to slither away, as a snake typically would be when it's on the move.
First, we move a vehicle into the garage, just as happened on the night, to see if the snake is disturbed.
And that car is practically right on top of him and he's still sitting there, even though he's exposed, he's not moving.
And while walking out of the garage, Sleeper said the snake slid over his boot.
He is making a fair bit of vibration, quite a lot of fast, sharp movements as he's walking around.
But here today, this snake remains most docile.
The snake has not moved towards that movement or towards that vibration.
While this experiment is only an indicator and does not disprove Sleeper's account of the night, it does show just how disinterested our snake seems to be in this cool environment.
The snake is not very likely to uncoil himself to slither towards John or to even slither across John's boot at this point in time. He's feeling quite safe in just staying coiled up and not moving.
Well, to tell us more about brown snakes and their habits on cold nights is herpetologist Christina Zdenek.
Christina Zdenek is one of Australia's leading herpetologists. She brings 2 decades of scientific expertise in snake behaviour to our investigation.
This snake that in this particular case was observed going into the garage, according to the evidence, at about 9 o'clock at night. Is that what you expect?
During April, which is when this event occurred, I would not expect that for an eastern brown snake.
Christina is questioned by our experts to try to better understand the role of the snake on the night of Leanne Sleeper's death.
How quick would that eastern brown snake move across that area, given the temperature and all of the circumstances? Would it be a slow movement or would it be a rapid movement?
I believe it would be a slow movement at those temperatures for that species. They're really reluctant, particularly eastern brown snakes.
Jeffrey Sleeper is walking around Would the snake be attracted to the source of those vibrations? Would it tend to deviate away from the vibrations?
I would say that they would tend to deviate away from the vibrations.
So it would tend to keep away from the source of that which disturbed it rather than be attracted to that source.
If there's disturbance, they want to keep their distance. All snakes want is a bit of space.
Thank you, that stands to reason. Thank you.
Just summing up then, Christina, it's a really unusual scenario, in other words. You're suggesting that it's an unusual thing to have happened.
It's unusual, and a lot of aspects of it, I admit, it sounds unlikely.
Coming up, the husband and wife
All is not rosy.
at the centre of this tragedy.
She was troubled about his behaviour.
Yes, she was.
The gun is what really bothers me.
And we take an even closer look
I can give you a demonstration.
at what happened that night.
He'd received such a start and he's gone back. There's more likely to have fired the weapon at a lower angle.
Likely to blow your foot off.
That's next on Under Investigation. Tonight, we're investigating the tragic death of Leanne Sleeber. Shot in the back by her husband at their home in the rural Queensland town of Kingsthorpe near Toowoomba.
On the face of it, we've got a man that tells us that he shot his wife to death with a shotgun in their shed. Now, there are a lot of things that need to happen in order for us to collect all of the facts.
Jeffrey Sleeber told police it happened when he was startled by the snake he and his wife were searching for on the night.
I'm trying to hold together as best as we can in this tough time.
Police accepted it was a terrible accident. But our panel has questions about the snake moving around on that chilly night.
How quick would that eastern brown snake move across that area?
I believe it would be a slow movement at those temperatures.
About the gun Jeffrey Sleeber was carrying.
He's originally taken a shovel to kill the snake. Then he's taking a gun. The gun is what really bothers me.
And the couple's relationship, the husband and wife at the centre of this small town tragedy.
Paula, you know this town. You've got a sense of it.
Yeah, I did a lot of door knocking.
Renowned Queensland investigative journalist Paula Donovan has worked extensively in the area, near Toowoomba, west of Brisbane.
It was quite interesting because it's obviously a case that is something that's very well known and almost in some ways, I guess, for some people in their DNA, yet no one wants to talk about it. It's like everyone's got an opinion, but no one wants to talk publicly.
So tell me about the Sleeber family. They're very prominent.
They are very prominent. They're a multi-generational farming dynasty.
The first of the Sleeber dynasty came from Lebanon in 1924 and established a multi-million-dollar farming and business empire. Sleeber's lawyer, Thomas Sullivan, telling police of the family's wealth during their interview with Jeffrey.
Not suggesting the Sleebers are like the Packers, but there is plenty of dough. There's no shortage of money.
Jeffrey Sleeber's high profile was totally the opposite to that of his wife and her understated suburban family. Leanne, a local girl, was a highly respected and devoted mum who volunteered at schools and was an active member of the nearby Lions Club. She was only 20 when she married into the influential Sleeber family.
So, young mum, they have 4 children together, and Leanne was just this incredibly devoted mother who just sort of really, motherhood was what helped her come into her own. It was where her strength was.
But Paula is concerned Leanne's life and her importance was lost in the tragic circumstances of her death.
I feel like Leanne's missing in all of this. It's about her, but she's missing in this.
Leanne irons the clothes, folds them up.
When you read the police interviews, The way that her husband speaks about her, it's more about what she does than who she is. And she's really, I just feel she's
definitely deserves
really lost.
justice in this case, doesn't she?
Absolutely. She was a classic good farmer's wife and mother. She's the epitome of maternity.
She doesn't work, didn't have a job, so just 100% on the kids.
Jeffrey Sleeber and his family told police his 13-year marriage to Leanne was a happy one. But others who knew them told Paula Donovan that wasn't always the case.
There had been some problems. The year before, Leanne had taken the kids and left the marital home, left her husband, moved in with her mum after she saw some texts on her husband's phone, and they gave her concern that she thought he may be having a extramarital relationship.
So there was evidence that he was making what was considered inappropriate contact with another woman.
Yes.
But there's also evidence that Leanne, which came from Jeffrey Sleeber's own interview with police, had accused him of having affairs.
Yeah.
And so she was troubled about his behaviour.
Yes, she was. And underlying all of this was the tension of him, what she described to people, and he himself admitted in the police interviews as being an absent husband, working long hours and not being there, and her basically running everything on her own. So that was bubbling in the background.
There was also evidence that Leanne had placed a large sum of money into a bank account in her name only.
An account Jeffrey Sleeber told police he was unaware of.
We have the fact that the marriage depends upon who's asking, but isn't that great.
The money being put aside.
Yeah, money put aside, possibly. Leanne's left on at least 2 occasions with the kids. So all is not rosy, but that just didn't get looked at.
There are also questions about the gun. As we've revealed, on the night, Jeffrey Sleeber carried a 12-gauge shotgun into the family garage while searching for the snake. Ballistics specialist and former detective Alex Christich says the weapon was a lethal choice.
A 12-gauge shotgun arguably is probably the most dangerous close-range weapon that you can carry.
I've just sort of, jumped and kicked back and the gun's gone off.
Jeffrey Sleeber told police his gun just went off and he was startled by the snake that moved across his boot. Alex Christich wonders how that happened.
Guns don't go off.
They don't just go off.
They don't go off. There's a number of things that need to happen in order for guns to fire. It needs to be loaded. It needs to be cocked. The trigger needs to be pulled so they don't go off by accident. People make them function or not function.
So no bumping or anything like that can make that gun go off?
I can give you a demonstration with this thing quite clearly, and you can actually see that no matter what I do to that gun apart from pulling the trigger, it will not fire. In this case here, the weapon's been cleared. It's got to be in battery, which means the weapon's closed. The hammer is pulled all the way to the rear. He says his wife is 4 to 5 metres in front of him and he's walking behind her with his gun next to him. He's a fairly solid sort of guy. He's walking behind her. All of a sudden, he sees the snake cross his foot, which causes him to jump and slip, or words to that effect. As he jumps and slips, he levels the weapon and fires it, shooting his wife in the back and killing her.
And Alex says that while Sleeber's version of events may be correct, the shotgun's weight and recoil make it more likely he would have fired at a much lower angle than he described.
Finger is on the trigger. He sees the snake. It would be reasonable to expect that if he'd received such a start and he's gone back, there's more likely to have fired the weapon at a lower angle. In most cases where you have unintentional discharges, the rounds hit the ground in front of the shooter, and either the pellets or what they call spall hits the
Likely to blow your
unintended
foot
target.
off.
Yeah.
So you're actually looking at two separate actions, really. You're looking at the gun having to be, if his wife Leanne is in front of him with her back to him, he's behind her. In order to shoot her in the middle of the back, he has to first raise the gun and then after that pull the trigger. Whereas if he did it as a reaction to the shock of seeing the snake, you'd expect him to be pulling the trigger at the same time as the gun's perhaps moving.
So it's a heavy gun.
Well, it is fairly heavy, but the thing is to elevate it from having it from next to me here to bring it up that high is a fair bit to do to pull it.
Coming up,
The purpose of the exercise today is to be able to demonstrate the results of a shotgun blast at various ranges.
on the gun range with Alex Christich.
So are you saying it couldn't have been 4 to 5 metres like Jeffrey Slater said?
No.
That's next on Under Investigation.
Then he says,
We're investigating the death of Leanne Sleeber, shot by her husband Jeffrey on the night of April the 24th, 2008.
He'd been trying to kill a snake they'd found in their Kingsthorpe home.
He told police the gun just went off when he was startled by a snake. Police accepted his account, but our experts question how that could have happened.
Guns don't go off.
They don't just go off.
They don't go off by accident. People make them function or not function.
And our panel also wants to understand just where Jeffrey Sleeber was when his gun discharged. On the night and later, perhaps due to shock, Sleeber gave unclear accounts of the distance he was from his wife.
he tells the ambulance officers that Leanne, his wife, was right there next to him. Then he says in the later field interview, the detective says he was following her pretty closely behind her. Then he says later on in a later interview that he was 4 or 5 metres away from her. He hasn't been pulled up on those vaguenesses or inconsistencies.
The purpose of the exercise today is to be able to demonstrate the results of a shotgun blast at various ranges.
At this underground range, ballistics expert Alex Christich will test the 2 distances Sleeber gave to try to establish which one is most likely. Based on the evidence provided to the Coronial inquest, Alex is using a 12-gauge single-barrel shotgun, loaded with the same ammunition said to have been used by Jeffrey Sleeber. The evidence is that Leanne Sleeber suffered a single shot to the back, leaving a small entry wound, described in the language of forensics as clean.
It means that the pellets hadn't actually left the wad at the time they entered the body.
Alex will fire into ballistic gel, considered material that closely matches human tissue, to show what happens when struck from 4.5 metres away, one distance at which Jeffrey Sleeber claimed he was standing. Pellets from the shotgun cartridge begin to disperse before hitting the gel, creating multiple entry wounds upon impact.
We have multiple entry wounds because the pellets have had an opportunity to leave the encapsulated thing in the wad, which indicates that the shot was taken from further back. In this case, 4.5 metres approximately.
Next, Alex moves in much closer.
This is the close range shot where the barrel was approximately 250 mil from the target.
The impact is dramatic. The pellets disperse only after entering the gel, leaving a single clean entry wound similar to that suffered by Leanne Sleeber.
As you can see here, there's no shot around there. See how small the entry wound is? I can barely get my finger in there.
The entry wounds, made from the shots fired from the two different distances, clearly suggest to Alex Christich where the gun was more likely to have been when it discharged.
This indicates to us that the muzzle was either touching or within 250 odd mil of the target area.
Point blank range.
Can I then ask, how difficult is it to shoot someone in the back when you're that close?
Well, he would have to have been within one step of his wife to bring the muzzle up 90 degrees and fire the weapon the way he says it occurred.
It seems difficult for him to have raised the rifle up so high.
It certainly does. That's the truth.
So are you saying it couldn't have been 4 to 5 metres like Jeffrey Sleeper said?
No,
not at all.
And that is
Mr.
consistent.
Sleeper was shot at point blank range.
A shot to the back at close range meant 33-year-old Leanne Sleeper had little chance of survival.
But despite the alarming circumstances and open questions, Jeffrey Sleeper is not charged with any offence, not even for firearm offences, given he didn't have a gun licence.
You're talking about a situation where a bloke has got at least 3 firearms in his possession and he hasn't got a licence.
The official line to us is that he didn't have a licence and the statute of limitations had passed.
The thing is, the competent investigator would ensure that any summary matters that would be arising from this would have been dealt with or would have been put in place prior to the statute of limitations expiring.
Just 2 days after Leanne was killed, Queensland Police determine her death an accident and prepare a report for the coroner.
No charges were laid at all. Is that unusual?
Extremely unusual. Well, you've got a scenario here where a bloke shoots his wife, kills her. The police say it's a terrible accident, and that's the end of it. I think any reasonable investigator in these circumstances would look for corroboration. He admits to doing certain things. The policeman's function or the detective's function is to look at all of the facts, obtain all of the available evidence to either corroborate or discount his story. There are lots of things that appear not to have been done here.
So at the very least, what might you have expected he would be charged with?
Well, in the first instance, I think murder would have been a good start and allow a jury to come down with down to manslaughter.
Exactly. It's a jury question, and a jury question must be addressed. The argument won't be as to whether he shot his wife or not. He did shoot her. The argument in that case will be as to whether it was an accident, and an accident is a defence which must be considered by a jury.
There are lots of policemen that need to answer some fairly hard questions.
Yeah, my confusion is that they start out, treat it as a homicide investigation. There's a press conference where it's reported that the investigation's been deemed a tragic accident and they're preparing a report for the coroner.
I'm smelling a big rat here.
In 2011, 3 years after Leanne Sleeper's death, a coroner investigates the case, stating an inquiry was in the public interest, despite attempts by Jeffrey Sleeper's lawyers to prevent it, saying there was no need for one to be held. And when the inquest does begin, the most crucial witness isn't available to give evidence.
Jeffrey Sleeper, the coroner is told, has suffered a serious mental health event, acute psychotic disorder.
Dr. Boris Lavik's strongly stated opinion was that Jeffrey Sleeper was unlikely to withstand the stress of attending court.
The coroner reluctantly excuses Sleeper from appearing. An extraordinary decision, according to former Queensland coroner John Hutton.
What I would have done is I would have adjourned the matter. There's no urgency. I'd have adjourned the matter and wish Mr. Sleeper all the best in recovery and looking forward to talking to him when he comes out of hospital. This whole thing was a complete farce.
Because the coronial inquiry went ahead.
Yeah, it was a farce.
It went ahead.
Well,
Without him.
it should not have gone ahead because the only witness was in a mental health institution.
Experts and police give evidence, and one detective, David Breeze, raises doubts about Sliber's story.
David Breeze says in that inquest that the version of events given by Mr. Sliber that night are inconsistent with the evidence that they have collected.
The coroner also heard from 4 snake experts who agree the snake's alleged behaviour as described by Jeffrey Sliber was highly unlikely.
He is making a fair bit of vibration, quite a lot of fast, sharp movements.
And our own experiment illustrated a similar outcome.
The snake has not moved towards that movement or towards that vibration.
After hearing from everyone except Jeffrey Sliber, the coroner finds that there is no evidence of criminality causing Leanne's death. But the coroner hands down an open finding.
The investigation, though, did not change course, and Queensland Police have confirmed to us they did not consult the Director of Public Prosecutions.
The matter should never have gone to the coroner in the first place. The matter should have been proceeded by way of criminal charge.
You would at least have thought that we'd review all of the evidence and say, well, let's send this to the DPP for an opinion, which happens every day. And I think in this case, I think Mrs. Sliber deserved at least that.
Coming up, 6 years on,
The impact and the damage that was done both to the deceased, to the bike.
Jeffrey Sliber is involved in another death.
Those policemen started with nothing and got a conviction.
It was a hit and run.
That's next on Under Investigation. The death of mother of 4, Leanne Sliber, has rattled her small Queensland country town community.
The response has been magnificent, and we can't thank the wider community enough for their support.
Her husband, Jeffrey, is never charged after shooting her in the back. A coroner and police accepting her death was an accident, despite Sliber never giving evidence. He's excused by the coroner after suffering a mental health episode. But our experts tonight query that decision.
It's a jury question, and a jury question must be addressed.
Jeffrey Sliber recovers from his crippling psychotic illness and gets on with his life.
He later remarries and continues his work driving trucks in his family's multi-million-dollar farming business.
And then, 6 years after shooting his wife and 3 years after the coronial inquest, Jeffrey Sliber is involved in another death.
Anzac Day 2014. The body of a cyclist is found on a long, straight country road outside Toowoomba.
The 61-year-old was hit and killed sometime between 2:30 and 3:30 yesterday afternoon on Inglewood-Millmerran Road.
The cyclist is identified as Dr. Martin Pearson, a local veterinarian anaesthetist considered a leader in his field.
Police believe he's been struck by a truck or four-wheel drive.
But with no witnesses and almost no clues, finding the culprit seemed impossible.
Judith Fordham. Dr. Pearson was hit at some speed, it seems. And from all reports, whoever hit him had to have known.
The impact and the damage that was done both to the deceased, to the bike, it was a hit and run.
Over the next 3 months, police conduct a meticulous investigation. They would finally find the man responsible, and it is Jeffrey Sliber. But how they did it was a masterclass in detective work.
Those policemen started with nothing and got a conviction.
During the investigation, Sliber did not come forward despite the police appeal for public assistance.
We'd also appeal to anyone that was driving on the road to inspect their vehicles to see if their vehicles has sustained any damage.
and knowing he had travelled the same road that day, about an hour from his home.
And didn't appear to have responded to any of the police public appeals. A colleague telling him that someone had been hit on that road, and a road that he had obviously travelled on.
At that time of day.
At that time of day, and it's Anzac Day, it's a public holiday.
And he had to have passed 2 other cyclists.
He did, yeah.
So he was aware of cycling.
Yep.
And
the bike was actually twisted in there, and there was almost, it was like an explosion of items that were just everywhere, and including the other side of the road, where I think was where the spotlight was found.
The broken spotlight was the big clue at the scene for police investigators, who believed it must have come from the vehicle that hit Dr. Pearson. Using that evidence, along with the bike's GPS,
traffic counter data and CCTV footage, they find the truck that hit and killed Dr. Pearson.
And Jeffrey Sleeber had recently replaced the spotlights on his vehicle.
And if you look at this photo here, look how high up those spotlights are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
they're at the head height.
That's right.
They're 6 foot off the ground.
One of the spotlights came off in the accident. He then removed the other one and replaced them both.
Sleeber later admits he was driving the truck the day Dr. Pearson was killed. He is charged.
But he claims he didn't know he had hit anyone, and his defence argues Sleeber also suffers from undiagnosed sleep apnea.
A condition, they said, that could have caused him to momentarily fall asleep at the wheel.
What do we know about undiagnosed?
Sounds like rubbish.
Undiagnosed. If he had sleep apnea to the extent that he was actually dropping off to sleep as he was driving, given that he drove a truck, daily, you would think that he would have perhaps sought help for that.
A jury finds Sleeber guilty of dangerous driving causing death and sentenced him to 3 years prison, suspended after 13 months. The judge said Sleeber must have realised at some point before the trial that he had hit Dr. Pearson. Any remorse, the judge said, was belated.
Clearly, it was a reckless act with no remorse shown afterwards.
Dr. Pearson's brother actually said that the humanity in him would have forgiven Sleeber if he had just said, I'm sorry for your loss.
You don't want a fellow human to go through needless suffering. But I did want him to be responsible. I did want him to be mature and take responsibility, to look me in the eye and say, I can't believe how you're feeling. Please forgive me. And the answer is yes, I would have gladly done that.
There was no apology to the wife, to the family he destroyed. This case of Dr. Pearson shows the man has no empathy whatsoever for the person whom he's killed.
Coming up,
the argument is not that he killed his wife. The argument is, was it an accident or not?
our experts ask,
I want to see him give evidence.
Was justice done?
This is not over. It can't be over. Not for Leanne's sake.
That's next on Under Investigation. Tonight, one of Australia's most strange and tragic cases. 2 deaths, 1 man responsible. 1 judged an accident, the other a crime.
Alex, this is a most peculiar set of circumstances for one man.
It definitely is. He's either extremely unfortunate or there's other things at play here.
As we've revealed tonight, Leanne Sleeber was shot in the back by her husband, who said his gun went off when he was startled by a snake.
It's unusual. If there's disturbance, they want to keep their distance. All snakes want is a bit of space.
Our experts have examined Jeffrey Sleeber's account of that terrible night.
It doesn't just go off.
The gun cannot go off.
Stand by.
The inconsistencies.
See how small the entry wound is?
So are you saying it couldn't have been 4 to 5 metres like Jeffrey Sleeper said?
No.
And that is
Mr.
consistent.
Sleeper was shot at point blank range.
Sleeper's mental health episode that prompted the decision to excuse him from giving evidence at a coronial inquiry.
This whole thing was a complete farce.
And how almost 6 years to the day of his wife's death, having recovered from his mental health condition, Sleeper killed another, veterinarian anaesthetist and cyclist Dr. Martin Pearson, run down by the truck Sleeper was driving. A death that only revealed Sleeper was responsible after incredible detective work.
Those policemen started with nothing and got a conviction.
2 horrific events involving one person. It is a terrible coincidence.
For the death of Dr. Pearson, Jeffrey Sleeper was sentenced to 3 years and was released from prison in 2019. But in the case of the death of his wife Leanne, with so many unanswered questions, our experts still ask whether justice was done. Former Queensland Coroner John Hutton is of the opinion there is still more work to be done.
The police, in relation to the death of Mrs. Sleeper, started with a smoking gun and a dead woman and have done nothing.
Veteran reporter Paula Donovan, our investigator on the ground, also believes it needs to be re-examined.
Leanne Sleeper's dead, but she's lost in all of this. She has no voice in this. And I would hope to see some kind of revisiting or some kind of testing of Jeffrey Sleeper in the right legal arena.
Criminal lawyer Judith Fordham believes that whatever the truth of the matter, Jeffrey Sleeper's failure to give evidence in any judicial setting is an issue.
I want to see him give evidence. He's got himself certified as unfit on one occasion, but since then he stood trial in relation to the death of the cyclists. So clearly he is capable of giving evidence, clearly he is capable of going to trial, and his psychosis, whatever it was, is now over. He's presumably medicated or something. I want to see him give evidence and answer the questions about any of the inconsistencies, of which there were many. This is not over. It can't be over. Not for Leanne's sake. It can't be over.
It'd be a miscarriage of justice if it is.
And former detective and ballistics expert Alex Christich, whose testing has been central to our investigation, agrees the case should be re-examined.
I think that this matter is worthy of a judicial review.
Yep, I agree entirely. The argument is not that he killed his wife. The argument is, was it an accident or not? That's the way the law runs in this country.
A judicial review, if ordered by Queensland's Attorney General, could examine all the questions that seem to remain outstanding and which, for the first time, could be asked of Jeffrey Sleeper under oath. And for Jeffrey Sleeper, it would be a chance to clarify once and for all the tragedy he witnessed that night. We invited Mr. Sleeper to participate in the program, but he declined.
And if you have any further information regarding the death of Leanne Sleeper, we'd like to hear from you. Our address is underinvestigation@9.com.au. Thank you all very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And I thank you. I'm Liz Hayes. Good night. Hello, I'm Liz Hayes, and thank you for watching Under Investigation. Subscribe to our channel now for exclusive clips, and don't miss out on full episodes of Under Investigation on 9Now and the 9Now app.